Welcome to Storytime with Chris Horner. Now, today's episode I want to talk about some of the experiences I've had with the doctor visits throughout my professional cycling career and since then. Basically, I want to bring a little bit of story time in for the athletes out there so they understand what to expect when you're going out there and you're going to start seeing some doctors for injuries or illnesses, and how the doctors can forget when they're looking at a professional rider or even a top amateur rider what they're really dealing with. Because the doctors really, throughout all my time of illnesses from 2014 when I got hit in the tunnel in Italy while I was riding for Lamprey all the way till now, I've really seen where the doctors have put me in a different category than what I should be in, and then they've misdiagnosed me, and of course that's cost me some pain and suffering and ended my career early for 2014. Now, first in 2014, as I told you, I got hit in the tunnel. After that, went on to do the Tour de France. Got sick at the Tour de France and started coughing, just massive coughing throughout the whole day, anytime I was awake, all the way for about 6 months. After that, the coughing had went away, but I got stuck with something in the lungs that every time I had eaten something, whether it was breakfast, snacks, lunch, dinner, anything like that, I was always coughing up something out of the lungs through the wintertime. Now, all of a sudden, we get into the race season in 2015, and I'm still coughing up massive stuff out of my lungs the more I train and the harder I train. Now I go to my doctor, not the team doctor, but my personal doctor down in San Diego, and I've been seeing him throughout my whole career and most of my life, really. Go see him, and he sends me to go see a lung specialist. And as I go see the lung specialist, they put me on a respirator, and of course I blow into the machine, and the liters of oxygen that I'm blowing into is about 2,000 liters over what an average male of my age at the time of about 45 years old would normally do. The lung specialist calls my doctor back up and he says, "Why'd you send me this guy? He's not sick." And so my doctor has to actually talk to the lung specialist and say, "Hey, you're dealing with an elite athlete here that can always put out more oxygen liters than any normal person out there walking the street that's smoking a cigarette normally." Because remember, when they're putting that little parameters around the normal people they see come into the hospital, they're taking the average male out there that's at 45 years of age, whether if he smokes a cigarette, drinks alcohol, or doesn't work out at all, and they're throwing that in there and averaging you in. Now, we fast forward a little bit, and they still have the lung problem. I'm over at National Jewish, one of the most world-renowned lung specialist hospitals in the world. And as I'm there doing tests, they have me on basically an oxygen depletion test, so basically like moving you up to altitude. I go in there with the nurse, and she starts doing the test, throws a little device up my nose so I can't breathe out of my nose and a piece in my mouth. She tells me to breathe normal, and as I'm breathing normal, she keeps knocking down the oxygen on the machine, which is, of course, putting me into oxygen jet. As the tests progress, I keep breathing normal. She keeps bringing the oxygen levels down. I start going into 80% oxygenated levels, and then I get into the 70%, and all of a sudden she turns the machine off and she starts freaking out. She tells me the test is done, and I get up and leave. Fly back to my Bend, Oregon home, and my doctor from National Jewish gives me a call, and he says, "Chris, there's something seriously wrong with you." And I said, "Dr. Kern, what's the problem?" He said, "You flatlined the machine." I started laughing because I don't know what it means to flatline the machine. I go, "Doc, you got to tell me, what does it mean to flatline the machine?" Clearly, I knew there was something interesting happening when the nurse canceled the test and walked out of there all kind of dumbfounded and expression on her face of disbelief. But I still didn't understand what that means. So Dr. Kern told me, he said, "Chris, we have everyone that takes this test, as we drop the oxygenated levels down, they start breathing harder. As we drop the oxygenated levels down on you, your breathing never changed." I throw a little chuckle at the doctor, and I said, "Of course it didn't change. I'm a professional cyclist, Doc. This is what we do as professional cyclists. Anytime you're watching the Tour de France, Tour of Spain, Tour of Italy, the big one-day classic races, when you're watching your favorite racer and he's coming up to the line, you'll see him. He's always controlling his oxygen. He's never trying to get in the oxygen jet. He's not letting his breathing get out of control. But if you notice, every time that rider crosses the finish line, they collapse afterwards, right? So they were controlling their breathing throughout the finish of that famous Alpe d'Huez climb, Mont Ventoux, or whatever it happened to be. Maybe it's the Angle route, but whatever it was, everybody collapses afterwards because you're trained throughout your career of racing your bike to control your breathing. I tell the doctor this story, and he's still like, "Chris, I've never seen anyone flatline the machine. So either the machine's off or you did something different. And so we need to bring you back. We have to fly you back to Denver and get a test. And I said, Doc, again, I'm a professional athlete. He tells me back, he goes, we have Olympic athletes in here all the time, Chris, and nobody has ever flatlined the machine. So again, I gave a little giggle. I said, again, Doc, you're talking about Olympic athletes. I know you think of as Olympic athletes as pro, but I think of Olympic athletes over at the Olympic Training Center as 18 to 22-year-old kids that have snotty noses. I start giggling again, and of course he knows I'm playing with him and have a little bit of sarcasm going. So he says, I'm going to fly you back. You're going to redo the test. So I fly back to Denver, rent a hotel, rent a car, get back to the hospital, and I go do the next round of tests. Only this time it's not just the nurse there that's doing the test. It's going to be another doctor overseeing to make sure everything is done spot on perfect, right? They hook me back up to the machine. They start bringing the oxygen levels down, start getting into the 80s, low 80s, then I get into the 70s. The next thing you know, the doctor's freaking out, the nurse is freaking out, and they cancel the machine and they tell me to go home. Dr. Kern calls me back and he says, you flatlined it a second time, Chris. And I said, I know, that's what we do. That's what professional athletes do. I say, Doc, you keep putting me in the same box with normal, everyday people that you see, and that's just not where professional athletes fit. We have a whole different checkbox for professional athletes. And so when I'm doing this video, I want to make sure all you young kids out there or you very fit athletes, when you go see your doctors, you have to make sure you tell them what box you're supposed to be in. We fast forward a little bit up to just this winter in December. And when I arrived over in San Diego, California for vacation time, I was going to do 2 months of vacation in San Diego at my friend's house there. And I was planning on doing the group rides the whole time for the 2 months. So I get down there on November 15th and I'm sick right away. 3 days in bed, then I recover, I feel fine. Start doing the group rides and I'm in the front of the group and throwing down with the guys all down there in SoCal and having a great time. Following week, I get sick on December 15th, and next thing you know, I'm in the ER. Now, I started about 3 a.m., and I started getting sick and throwing up all over. It was nasty, liquids coming out of every place of your body, and I got massive cramps, like full cramps through both legs and hands as my buddy Steve is driving me to the emergency room. Now, I get there, my boy pushes me into the emergency room, and as I'm getting brought back there, of course, they want to make sure you got all your insurance and all that. And when that's happening, I'm throwing up all over the place in front of the nurses. And then finally, they rush me to the back. Afterwards, I get in the back. Right away, it's an IV fluids and then some pain meds and some anti-nausea meds. And then they get everything under control again about 5 hours later, and they say you're ready to leave. I couldn't understand why they were really releasing me to go so early, but I did start to feel a bit better. So I was like, okay, we're ready to go. What was the problem? The doctor there at the ER said he just thought it was a viral infection of something, wasn't sure exactly what it was, so they sent me home. I went to sleep for a day and a half, and then I got up on Friday. That was at the ER on Wednesday, get up on Friday, and as the day was coming to an end, I decided to go out on my bike and ride my bike for an hour because I'm on vacation, right? So I felt good for that hour of bike riding. I do the group ride the next day, the Saturday group ride in San Diego. When we get to the top of the climb, it's just me and one other guy. We dropped everybody else in the group and we're chatting as we're going over the top of the climb. And I'm like, something's a little bit off. I know the form's good, but something just doesn't feel right. Something feels different. It's not fatigue, it's not soreness, but something's catastrophically different, yet I'm still riding good. Get back to my house and I call my buddy Pete Thole and I said, Pete, I think I'm done with the group rides. Something's just not right. And Pete Thole's like, man, you were riding good though. You're putting the hammer down, riding in the front of the group. Are you sure? I'm like, yeah, something's not right, but I don't know what it is. So from that point on, every time I took a couple rest days, I'd feel better and then I could ride the bike again. But then after a hard medium training ride, I'd start to get fatigue again. So I'd take a couple more days off. Fast forward up to January 15th thereabouts, and all of a sudden, I'm at the urgent care here in Bend, Oregon, and as I'm going in there getting checked in, I'm throwing up in the parking lot. They bring me into the urgent care, and my heart rate's about 95. Just sitting there on the bed there, the hospital bed. They give me IV fluids. Again, they give me some anti-nausea meds, and I start coming around and feeling a bit better. And the doctor looks at me. I really believe it was the nurse, not the doctor. The nurse looks at me and says, we got your heart rate under control. And I look over at the machine. Heart rate says 70, 75 heart rate, and I look at the nurse and I say, that's not under control. If I had had a normal night's sleep, woke up, drove over here, laid on your bed, got an IV fluid for an hour, and then you took my heart rate, it'd probably be 39 right now, maybe 45 max. So if I'm 75 right now, we're talking about a 50, 60% increase. But because they throw you in the box of the normal person walking the street and not an athlete or professional athlete or even a solid weekend warrior where your heart rate would be lower, they're thinking 70, 75 looks good. I'm thinking this is absolutely insane. And so they can't figure out the problem there. They'd send me home as they want to do some more checks. When I get home, temperature rises, everything becomes catastrophic emergency situation, and I'm back at the ER later that night about 9 o'clock. When I arrived at the ER, the temperature, body temperature is 105 degrees, and the registration nurse looks at me and she says, I've never seen 105 degrees. When I look behind me, I see that the waiting room is absolutely completely full, and I'm thinking, I'm going to die right here waiting to even get into the emergency room. She looks back at me and she says, don't worry, you're in front of the line. We got a bed that's going to be cleared here in moments, and we'll get you back there. As soon as they get me back on the bed, I see multiple doctors coming around me, and they're all talking to themselves. And whenever multiple doctors are talking to themselves and not talking to the patient directly, you know there's probably a health issue that's going to be extreme. Now, all of a sudden, the doctor finally comes back and starts talking to me, and she says, you got kidney stones. You got kidney stones that have gotten infected, and now you have sepsis, and the sepsis has spread through the body so much that your fever is up at 105 and your organisms are going to stop working at any moment. So we need to get this under control right away. You are an extreme emergency case at this moment, so we got to take care of you effectively right now at this moment. And the whole time I'm thinking as I'm sitting there on the emergency room bed, wow, I was at the emergency room December 15th, and they missed kidney stones or sepsis at that point in time. And of course, they missed it that morning of January 15th when I was at the urgent care center. Now, I'm in the hands of the doctors. They're doing a great job of looking after me and trying to get the temperature down. But for the next 4 days, I'm stuck at the hospital bed getting looked after by some fabulous nurses who are taking care of me spot on throughout the whole 4 days. And they're able to get the temperature down into the lower number. So I'm right around about 100 most of the 4 days. And then they discharged me, a couple more hard days. And then after that, at the last 3 days before filming this, I've felt absolutely fantastic the last 3 mornings where I've woken up with no soreness whatsoever. So I got to ask myself, how long have I been dealing with this sepsis problem, kidney stone problem that of course is what has turned into sepsis. But either way, I thought it was an important video to bring to you guys because if you're a professional athlete, of course, that's why I like to do the videos, is for the professional kids out there that are trying to go big time. And then, of course, for all the elite riders out there and the athletes that are just above that normal category box, when you go see your doctor, you got to make sure you tell them what your stats really are. Are you a 70 heart rate person when you're laying on the bed, or should you be 39 or 45? In my case, 39 and 45 is normal. When you're sitting 70, clearly there's still a health issue. So if I'd thought about bringing it up to the doctors in San Diego, California, there at Scripps Memorial when I was there on December 15th, I could have possibly saved myself a lot of pain and suffering if I just said, nope, it's not time for me to leave. I'm still off 70 heart rate while I'm laying here in bed getting an IV. I prefer to do some more tests. Instead, I let the doctors keep me in their box of what they believe I should have been, and they sent me home. And of course, now I have sepsis and have to recover. Now, hopefully, with the temperature down, like I said, I'm feeling better each day as each day passes on antibiotics. I'll go back in a couple weeks here, about 10 days, I believe, to have the kidney stones removed, and then hopefully all will be fine after that. And I'm curious, because remember, as a 51-year-old, when my heart rate kept going up throughout the last 2 months, I was always starting to ask myself the same thing that every 50-year-old male athlete or female athlete out there starts to ask themselves. Am I just getting slow, or is there something wrong with me? Or is it just age? So a lot of times you got to keep in mind, if you were feeling good before, make sure the doctors understand what box you should be checked under. Hope you guys enjoyed the story today, and I hope it really helps some of you athletes out in the future with your doctor visits when you're coming up and you're injured or sickness. Maybe it helps you heal a little bit faster. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. I'll see you on the next edition real soon.